The CEO dropped the thick folder at the single father's feet and watched him bend down to pick it up. Before he could stand, she took it from his hands and dropped it again. A few executives went silent. She gave him a cold smile. "Pick it up." He did. Then she scattered several papers across the polished floor. She pointed down. Every page. He swallowed his pride and crouched again while everyone watched. What the CEO did not know was that the man she was humiliating had spent the last 6 weeks quietly documenting something that could threaten her entire position. 6 weeks earlier, Mason had started working at Halston Group as a junior financial analyst. He was qualified for the job, but his only suit was slightly too large at the shoulders, and one cuff had been repaired with nearly invisible stitching. At Halston Group, he arrived early and left late. During his second week, Mason noticed something strange in a quarterly report. One number had been changed. The original figure suggested that one of the company's newest divisions was losing money. The published report showed a modest profit. Mason checked the source data twice. He found the same pattern in 2 earlier reports. Someone had been changing numbers before they reached the board. Mason reported the discrepancy through the internal finance system. Nothing happened. 3 days later, his request disappeared. He tried again. A senior analyst stopped him near the elevators and quietly warned him. "Don't keep pushing this." Mason asked why. The man looked toward the executive floor. "Because people who push don't stay here long." Mason went back to his desk. The problem was larger than a bad report. The company was afraid, and someone at the top had taught everyone to be afraid. That person was Victoria, Halston Group's CEO. Mason had never personally crossed her, until the morning she summoned him to an executive review meeting. He arrived carrying the same worn folder containing his financial notes. Victoria was already seated at the head of the table. Several senior executives watched as Mason entered. She glanced at his jacket, then at the folder. "Bring that here." Mason approached. She opened the folder and studied the pages. "You've been asking questions about our reports." Mason nodded. "I found some numbers that don't match the original records." A faint smile appeared on Victoria's face. "Do you think you're qualified to question this company?" Every eye in the room turned toward him. Mason could have defended himself. Instead, he said quietly, "I think the numbers deserve an explanation." Victoria stood. She picked up the folder and dropped it at his feet. The sound against the polished floor echoed through the room. "Then explain them." Mason bent down and picked it up. She waited until he stood. Then she dropped it again. Several papers slid loose. A nervous laugh came from one side of the table. Victoria looked around as if nothing unusual had happened. "Pick it up." Mason crouched again. His face burned, but he kept his eyes on the papers. Victoria watched him gather the pages one by one. Then she deliberately scattered the remaining papers around his shoes. "Every page," she repeated. Mason slowly reached for them. But when he picked up the final sheet, he noticed something written in the corner that he had never seen before. A handwritten number. The same number that had disappeared from his original report. Mason turned the page over. The handwritten number matched the figure he had been trying to trace for weeks. He looked up at Victoria. For the first time, her confidence faltered. Mason explained that it came from an older version of the report. Victoria took the page and closed the folder. The meeting ended. Mason returned to his desk expecting to be fired. Instead, Victoria requested every original file he had reviewed. That frightened him. That afternoon, Mason found another inconsistency. The altered numbers were connected to a major acquisition. If the real losses became public, investors could pull out. Mason copied the records. The next morning, Victoria called him into her office. She admitted that some numbers had been adjusted. The company had invested heavily in a new division, and exposing the losses could destroy the acquisition. She insisted she had never ordered anyone to falsify records. Elliot, the chief financial officer, entered. Victoria asked about the original figures. He blamed a reporting error. Mason stayed silent. Then Victoria placed the handwritten page on her desk. Elliot's expression changed. Victoria opened 3 reports. The same figure appeared in every original version, and disappeared from every final version. Elliot finally admitted that he had ordered the changes. He had hidden losses from a failed expansion project, hoping to recover the money before the board noticed. Victoria asked why nobody had reported him. Elliot looked at her. "Because they were afraid of you." The words silenced the room. Victoria dismissed him and ordered an independent audit. But the problem was bigger than Elliot. Her leadership had created an environment where employees feared bringing her bad news. Then she admitted something Mason hadn't expected. She had suspected he might be right before she humiliated him. She wanted to see whether he would back down. Mason thought about his daughter, the bills waiting at home, and the repaired cuff of his jacket. He admitted that he had almost backed down. Victoria asked what stopped him. Mason answered quietly, "Losing my job would hurt. Learning to stay silent would cost me more." Victoria had no answer. The following week, Victoria suspended the acquisition and created a confidential reporting system that bypassed senior management. Mason shined the new financial oversight team on one condition: employees should never have to choose between truth and a paycheck. Months later, the hidden losses were exposed, but Halston survived. One afternoon, Victoria watched Mason review a report with several employees. One of them hesitated before speaking. Mason told him to continue. Nobody laughed. Nobody told him to let it go. Victoria remembered Mason on the floor, gathering papers, while everyone looked away. The humiliation had lasted less than a minute, but its consequences changed the company. Mason still wore the same slightly oversized jacket and carried the same worn folder. Now nobody questioned whether he belonged there. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who has ever stayed silent because speaking up felt too dangerous. And tell us, if you were Mason, would you have kept collecting evidence after being humiliated or walked away? Subscribe for more stories about dignity, courage, and second chances.